What? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Poetry Salon. I am Tresha Haefner. I'm the founder of the Poetry Salon, and today we are going to be talking about songs of protest, which my husband pointed out might be a little misleading because they're not necessarily songs where we're talking about political and politically minded poetry. But as I pointed out to my husband, a poem is a form of a song. So I think songs of protest is a perfectly acceptable name. But if you did come here thinking that we were going to get out our guitars and start singing Pete Seeger, we're only metaphorically singing. Otherwise, we are writing. And I want to say again, thank you very much for being here and taking the time to write about poetry and make your voice heard and learn some new techniques. So to start us off with, I have asked everybody to respond to this prompt, and I need to go back to the share button. Where did that go? More share. Okay. Share, Sunny and share. All right, so I got an idea for our first part of our prompt from this wonderful poet named Brenda Cardenas, who was featured on the Poetry Salon cast, and you can listen to my conversation with her about how she generated this poem. But it's called "If All of History Were Stuffed in a Jar." Could you count the antelope eyes and owl talons, the suffocating worms, moths, buffaloes staining the plains? Could you divine colonizers' gauche lust for the hustle and chase, busloads of gold, their filthy blankets, their wheezing Anthropocene? Would you shake the jar, rattle its plastic potpourri, its acrylic aroche teeth? Could your ears have ever anticipated the blast in uranium that the word greenhouse would evoke gas chambers, the code that conifers would create to speak with their deciduous neighbors, secret talk like drum beats? Just think, I might have watched through the Mason's glass our final solar eclipse. You might have pried open the lid and stolen an amulet you thought you could use as a shield. I really love this poem. And the reason that I wanted to start with this is I think it's asking a good question. What could you fit in a jar? And in the prompt, I asked everyone to write down some items you think you could fit in a jar. Uh, and there's a bit of a cheat here because Brenda Cardenas starts with something really small. Could you count the antelope eyes, the owl talons, the suffocating worms and moths? So those are items that really are small enough you could fit them in a jar. But then she goes on to, the buffalo staining the plain. Could you divine the colonizers' gauche lust for the hustle and chase, the busloads of gold? Some of those things are abstractions. Lust, I don't think you could put lust in a jar, although the perfume companies definitely try to do that. Just like, try this fragrance, it's lust. Right, but you can't put actual lust in a jar. You can't fit a busload of gold into a jar. She's taking poetic liberty there. But I hope all of you took it as being really serious and you did list some things that are really small enough to be in a jar. And I'll talk about why that is in a moment. Um, and I, of course, would ask everyone to please list some of your items in the chat so I can get an idea of what we have. Pocket Constitution, that's a good cheat. Yeah, you couldn't fit the whole one in there, but you could fit the Pocket Constitution in there. Arrowheads, apple seeds, cold coins, gold coins, um, some no kings buttons. Let's see. The poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty, nice. Salt Seed, Needles, the Purple Heart, my grandfather died in World War II. Um, the Pride Parade is protest. The Scepter broken. The ballot, voting booth, yeah, it would be a little hard to put that in there, but the ballot definitely. Wedding ring of my grandparents. An ILGWU union label. Thank you, my grandmother's brooch. The dinner table with argument at full blast. Thank you for that. It's a good point. I mean, it's not technically small enough to fit into a jar, but it is personal and it is physical, so I'll allow it. A tiny vial of maple syrup. Yeah, vials of blood from different people, from Native Americans, from enslaved people, from immigrants. That's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of putting it that way, but yeah, that's something you could talk about. Ship manifests, journals, photos, wedding rings, unspun cotton, bobby hair ties that went click clack. The rosary I was given at baptism. Um, Bullets, handcuffs, whistles, mace, balaclava. I guess you could put baklava in there too. Ice, knees, fists, eyes, false arrests, fear, and more. Gun, arrows, ropes, rocks, sane petitions, whiskey vials, core tickets, rags, moonshine. Um, I'm gonna. Oh man, I hate to miss any of these, but there's a long list. So, yeah, these are great examples, and you guys are welcome to keep adding more to it. We might wind up making a whole group poem out of this chat, which could also be really cool. So thank you very much for starting off with this warm up. I'm going to get into some of the bigger picture here. And I just want to say, for those of you who have taken workshops with me before, I usually like to start off by inviting everyone to say their name and where they're from and tell me why they're in this workshop and what they're hoping to get out of it. But we are actually a larger group today. There's, I think, 35 of us here. So, if we all went around and said something about ourselves, that would take up a lot of our writing time. So I'm just going to say, if you want to put your name and where you're currently located in the chat, that's a great way for us to get to know each other. But otherwise, I'm going to walk through some instruction and some writing ideas. And then we're going to have some quiet time where you can pick one of the several prompts and lessons, exercises that I'm going to share. And then at the end, I will turn off the recording and anyone who wants to share can share. We may go over and I will stay longer if there's more people who want to share, but I do want to try to get us out of here at the 90-minute mark for anyone who has other things that they have to go to. Okay. And if you have questions, please just either raise your virtual hand, or you can also turn on your video and raise your hand. But if you are here and not me, please, everyone, make sure you're muted just so we don't have crosstalk. Okay. All right. So, am I still sharing my screen? I am sharing my screen. Yeah, I'll keep sharing my screen. We don't have to have my face front and center here. Let me get back to the shared screen though. Yeah, there we go. All right. So, nope, that's not what I want. I want to get back to my screen. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I wanted to say something starting out here, which is that I have been teaching creative writing for a while. Recently, we started our own journal called Odd Pocket Press, which has been really very fun. I've gotten a lot of poems sent in by poets I know and by poets I don't know. And one of the things that I'm noticing is a lot of poets right now are writing about political issues. I think that's always true, but right now it seems like we have a lot to process and a lot to talk about and a lot that people want to speak up about. And writing political poems or poems that address political issues seems to be a particularly challenging kind of poem. And the poets that I know, I'll put it this way, I know some poets who write some very, very effective, moving poems that I've seen them write about personal issues. And then when they go to write politically based poems, sometimes I feel like a lot of the things they know about how to write a poem, their craft, they just sort of forget about it. And I think a lot of that is because the way that we talk about politics is sometimes very, very different from the way we talk about poetry. And what I mean by that, I gave another workshop a while ago that was about what you need, what a poem needs in order to get published. And what a poem really needs is it needs to have something very specific, something very personal that only you can talk about, something specific, which usually is something also very surprising. But then it also needs to be about a bigger issue. It needs to be about something universal. So if I tell the story of, how I met my husband, for example, there's something specific about that because not everyone met their, spouse or someone they love in California, in Santa Monica on a rainy afternoon after eating Thai food. So that's the specific thing. But love, love is a pretty universal topic. So we all can relate to what it means to want to find love. Even if it's not romantic love. So we can expand it even further and just it's about love in general. So that's the universal, and that's something also really, really specific. And when we get to talking about politics, that's oftentimes not what we're talking about. We're often talking about these big abstracts. This is right, that's wrong, this will affect everyone in a good way, this will affect everyone in a terrible way. Some of the better, more well-spoken politicians will bring the poetry into it. I don't know if I want to say anything specific. Oh, I will. But when Michelle and Barack Obama were launching their library, what do we call it? Dedicating their library. I remember them talking about how this library would be a great place to go in and read books and learn about history and everything like that. But then they were also saying, or, you can bring a picnic and you can sit on the lawn and you can have date night. You can have your kids here doing this. And they were really making it specific about what you could be doing, how individuals might engage, how different individuals might engage with their presidential library. And I was thinking about that going like, see, that's more of the poetry. It's less of that abstract and bringing it down to more personal, concrete things and ways we can interact with each other. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Does anyone have any questions about what I'm saying at the onset here? Okay. I'm not getting paid, but I am drinking Dr. Brew's kombucha, passion fruit orange, which I got at Costco. So just so you know, it's non-alcoholic. All right. I recommend it too. It's really tasty. So what we're going to talk about today is really pretty much some techniques that I think you need for any kind of poetry that you write. So if you're here and you specifically want to talk about politically motivated subject matter, that's cool. But you can take these exercises and you can really use them to address anything. There is a famous statement, and if anyone knows who said it and wants to put it in the chat, I'd be grateful. But the political is personal. The personal is political. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Who said that? Someone very wise. The personal is political. So in some ways, that distinction is a little bit of a watery line there. But the first exercise that I want to give, second exercise, the history in a jar was the first one. The second exercise I want to give is about making something personal. So let's do another 5 minutes of just note taking and jotting down some ideas. But I'm going to ask, what are some specific historical events that you have personally witnessed in real time? Or another variation on that, or what are some policies or events that have directly affected you in your life? And you might also ask, what are some of the ways you've responded to these events and policies? How have you seen others respond? And if you want to get little Freudian about it, why does this matter to you? What does this remind you of in your own life? And what do your reactions reveal? I know that's a lot of questions. So right now it might just be a little brainstorming and no one's going to be required to share this. So you can be as honest as you want. You can be as sloppy in your writing. Don't worry about your spelling. You might just list some phrases. You don't have to write full sentences, but we're just going to take about 5 minutes to just do a little brainstorming on that. All right, everyone, this is just the 1 minute warning. We're going to pause in about 1 minute. Okay. So I see most people have their videos turned off, and as I said, that's perfectly fine with me. I just hope that you all have come back and that you didn't all wander off. So if you guys can oh, okay, I see some of you turning your video on. Okay, I just want to make sure that people are back and hearing me and everything. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, um, yeah, thank you for also continuing to put things in the chat. It is really interesting to see and to get to know a little bit more about this group by seeing what things you have all personally lived through and examples of things you might directly address. Uh, Yeah, one interesting one would be, where were you on January 6th? I think that was a recent thing, and probably all of us remember where we were. So that would be an interesting prompt that we could all respond to. I want to say a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is informed by this wonderful book by Matthew Zapruder called Why Poetry by Matthew Zapruder. Love that name. Who is also the author of Come On, All You Ghosts. And specifically, there is a chapter in here called Three Political Poems. And I didn't quote this, but as I'm opening the book and reading it, this is a great quote. I think he more articulately says what I was trying to say earlier. It is a powerful thing when a poem finds its way, directly or otherwise, to the biggest issues in our social lives. Yet even the greatest poets can stumble when they start to bend their poems to a political purpose. Political poems have a tendency to turn into lyricized essays or editorials or sermons or rants. This is partially because the language of politics is so often designed to do the opposite of what poems do. The poet has to remain vigilant, not to slip into euphemism, generalization, obscuring abstraction. And it is also because the subject matter is so important to the poet, which can cause the poet to begin to prioritize tasks better left to prose, informing, convincing, lecturing, describing, and reporting. And then in this chapter, Matthew Zapruder goes on to talk more about what poetry should do and lists three examples. And one of them is Audre Lorde's poem Power, which I'm going to share with you guys now. And let me share this poem before we even talk about it too much. And this is in the document that I shared. The written version of this is here in this document, but I have the audio of her reading it. So we're going to listen along as we read along. Share sound. Okay, so here's Audre Lorde reading her poem, Power.
Power. The difference between poetry and rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children. I am trapped on a desert of raw gunshot wounds and a dead child dragging his shattered black face off the edge of my sleep. Blood from his punctured cheeks and shoulders is the only liquid for miles, and my stomach churns at the imagined taste while my mouth splits into dry lips without loyalty or reason, thirsting for the wetness of his blood as it sinks into the whiteness of this desert where I am lost beyond imagery or magic, trying to make power out of hatred and destruction, trying to heal my dying son with kisses, only the sun will bleach his bones quicker. A policeman who shot down a 10-year-old in Queens stood over the boy with his cop shoes in childish blood, and a voice said, "Die, you little motherfucker," and there are tapes to prove that. At his trial, this policeman said in his own defense, "I didn't notice the size and nothing else, only the color," and there are tapes to prove that, too. Today, that 37-year-old white man with 13 years of police forcing was set free by 11 white men who said they were satisfied justice had been done, and one black woman who said they convinced me, meaning they had dragged her 4-foot black woman's frame over the hot coals of 4 centuries of white male approval until she let go the first real power she ever had and lined her own womb with cement to make a graveyard for our children. I have not been able to touch the destruction within me, but unless I learn to use the difference between poetry and rhetoric, my power too will run corrupt as poisonous mold, or lie limp and useless as an unconnected wire, and one day I will take my teenaged plug and connect it to the nearest socket, raping an 85-year-old white woman who is somebody's mother, and as I beat her senseless and set a torch to her bed, a Greek chorus will be singing in 3/4 time, "Poor thing, she never hurt a soul, what beasts they are."
I'm seeing some of your faces. Yeah, if you've never heard that poem before, it's a real tour de force. And what I find really, and what I think Matthew Zapruder talks about in his book too, and part of why this poem is poetry and not a rant is because the speaker turns this back on herself. One of the things I notice, especially when I am reading poems that are politically motivated, you get the impression that the speaker of the poem really believes in what's right and what's wrong, and they know for certain this is right, this is wrong. And if you're carrying that attitude to the page, there's really not anywhere to go with that. There's not a lot of room for discovery. There's not a lot of room for personal revelation. And that's not to say that, maybe you are right about your perspective, but that's a political rant. That's an essay. That's not what a poem is. A poem needs to be personal. A poem needs to turn back to the speaker of the poem and reveal something about them. A poem needs to surprise the reader, and usually the best way to do that is also to surprise yourself as a speaker of a poem. And poems need to have less, I would say, less moral authority and a lot more a sense of the ambiguous, a sense of the not quite knowing what what is right or wrong? Or another way to put that, if that makes you really uncomfortable, is maybe that you're talking about something that's very big and very complex, and you can't boil it down to a cliche certainty, right? Um, so, what Audre Lorde does in that poem, if I'm understanding it correctly, is, she's giving us some facts about this one really specific incident that happened, the white police officer who kills the black boy. And without her saying it directly, I think she sets it up that it's so unfair that this police officer is going free. And then her thinking, you know, I could be that angry. If I am not careful, I could go and use this anger to do something really violent to someone else's mother. I could beat her senseless. And then I'd have people looking around me saying, like, oh, how violent she is, what a beast she is. So she's turning this back on her, and she's realizing something about herself, that she's got this anger inside of her and doesn't want to wind up. Actually, she doesn't say that specifically. She just says, this could happen. I could be this angry. I could do this thing, and this is how people would react to me. But she's not really putting a moral judgment on. Let me put that better. She's not boiling this very complex subject down to a simple moral judgment like that is wrong and I am right, because that would be very flat in comparison to the powerhouse of what she gives us. So I want also to look at another poem by Sonia Greenfield. Am I still sharing my screen? Let's see. Let me just make sure I'm still sharing the screen. No, let me go back. So in this effort to make things more personal, back to me. There we go. One of the things that you can do is turn the issue on yourself, and you can use this as a way of examining yourself and maybe some of the ways this reveals things that, are hard to admit about yourself. But another way to make things personal is just to talk about maybe a political issue or something that has happened, an event, and find a way to connect it to your personal life, why this issue might stir something up for you. Usually that's because you can identify with the people who are being affected in some way. So this is a poem by Sonia Greenfield called Ghost Ship. And if you don't know Sonia's work, she's a wonderful poet. She's been on the Poetry Salon cast. She's read this poem on there. But she's also the editor of Rise Up Review, which is geared towards poems of social justice. So I'd really recommend reading Rise Up Review for more examples of poems that address political issues. And if you don't remember this, I might get the year wrong, but it was, I think, like 10 years ago now. There was a building in Oakland called the Ghost Ship, and it was basically like an artist colony for a lot of low-income young artists in Oakland, and the landlord was not keeping the building up to code. And as a result of that, there was this huge fire one night, and a lot of people died. And the building, as I said, was called Ghost Ship. So that's what the title is referencing. Ghost Ship. I have been that young, that electrified by the bohemian scene of a city spilling its lights all around me. I have been to parties in sketchy spaces where painters have work on the walls that should be seen by millions, but is seen by the few of us figuring out who we're going to fuck after too much cheap wine drunk from plastic tumblers, figuring out how we're going to make it a country's wit away from families, struck out on our own like explorers, getting comfortable with being alone in a wilderness that is actually just a room rented in a house of strangers. I have been that woman, high on E, my eyes dull dark, jaw clenched, body ready to swallow pleasure in a million lusty gulps. I know any space we inhabit can become a ghost ship. I have read enough to know stories of wildfires, of boats found empty, of the soul yanked whole cloth from its innocent wearer. But you can't live in fear of the apparition, the adventurers afloat on their rickety structure and cast to a sea of flames. It can happen at any time to anyone. So when the music flares up and takes a hold of you, when a swirl of colored spotlights sets you spinning, you have to dance as if the very act of living depends on it. So I really love this poem. And, when this happened, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are from the Bay Area. I have friends who knew people who died in that conflagration. And you could write a political poem that's about focusing on the landlord, focusing on greed. You could write a poem that blames the young kids who weren't careful with their electronics. You could really get into a political diatribe, and there was certainly a lot of political discussion around this. But Sonia Greenfield is making it very personal and starting off with that line, I too have been, how is she like these? I keep saying kids, but it wasn't just kids. But how has she been like these people who were the victims of this event, of this fire? And so she finds her way of identifying and talking about why it's so meaningful to her and why she has this connection. Okay. So yeah, let's see. We did a little free write for there. Uh, I'm not used to being the one who talks this much. Usually at this point, I'd be inviting everyone else to read your poems. And I will get to that, I promise, but we are going to move on to one more exercise, and then I want to invite everyone to take some time to do their own writing, but let's do this really quickly. This is a third thing that I think poetry really needs to do. As I said, if you're writing a poem where you start out saying, I have this opinion, and this is my opinion, and then I'm just going to rant about it, and at the end, I'm going to close by saying, see how right I am. The poem's going to be flat. It's not going to move. And another great way that you can make a poem move and give it more dynamics and make it more interesting is to show the ways in which people are acting. And by acting, I mean taking action. So this is where we get a lot of verbs in here. Yeah, do I want to do this? This is a great one by Joy Harjo about witnessing 9/11, but it's a much longer poem. Okay, let me skip down to this one. This is called Warrior Song after Robert Pinsky. It's written by Benjamin Garcia. And you'll just notice that this is a poem about moving. This is what happens when one thing happens, we react in this other way. Warrior Song after Robert Pinsky by Benjamin Garcia. When our mothers had no water for themselves, we drank. When we had no bed, we mapped a plot in the dirt. We had to lie in the dirt of your country. When we had no money, we worked. When we had no license, we walked. When we had no strength, our mind kept walking. When we had no passport, our blood was our passport. When there was no train, we hauled the weight of our own body. When we had no companion, we remembered God is our companion. When we had no direction, our family was our compass. When we had no faith, luck was our faith. When we have finished, death will be our luck. Undocumented is our status. Resistance is our cause. Because we cannot sleep, we dream with open eyes. And Benjamin Garcia has an essay, I think this is in the Kenyon Review, where this was originally published I'm kind of talking about some of the challenges of writing this poem based off of the Robert Pinsky one. Let me make sure he gets the proper attribution in there. Okay. So you'll notice that this isn't just a poem about this is a bad thing, this is my opinion about this thing. It's showing one action and then the way that people respond to that action. So it's showing cause and then effect and more cause and more effect, and how people are interacting and literally moving forward. All right, so that's one great example. This one is by Kai Coggin. This is the only political poem from really recent days that I'm including, and this one was written and published. Well, it says it right here. This is I Am My Own Country Now, written on November 6, 2024. And I believe actually this is on One Art, and we have the recording of Kai reading it herself. But this is another example of how we're looking at responses to challenging events and challenging times.
I am my own country now.
I need to make sure I'm sharing the sound. Share sound, share, okay.
At the very bottom of myself, at this time of highs and lows, ebbs and flows, moving through colors of emotion with no wind at my back, waiting to see if I can again pull myself up from the depths of defeat. Here I am, borderless inside myself, surrounded by a country that no longer dreams it can dream. I am my own country now, patriotic only for my own quiet tenderness, a citizen of loss and finding again a reason to hold on. The capital city of my heart sparks a little flame on the hilltop of my soft body, and I am trying to find again a reason to stand up for the vision of freedom I held for us all, to light the way somehow through all the impending, unabridged darkness. I am my own country now. My neighbors pushed a lotus back down into the mud when we were so close to the surface, when we were at the cusp of breakthrough, when we could almost see her iridescent petals reflecting the sunlit stars blushing with sweetness, now lost in a poisoned swamp of collectively stepping backward. I am my own country now. I have taken the stars from the old flag and hung them from my eyelashes, left the red, left the stripes, left the scars, left the blue empty night square there as some long-lost pinpoint of progress. I am my own country now, and here the shores of my hands are slowly opening again from the fists of this, knowing the shapes of new truths. I am the only homeland I know. No one can govern my life. No man owns my body, my choices. I am free. I am free. I am free, even if I die in that freedom. I am my own country now, an individual revolution. I threshold my collarbones to greet first the small tender ones, the vulnerable green, the silent lichen, and supple mosses, the sapling sycamore and autumn redbud, the black-capped chickadee, wood thrush, and squirrels, the swirling colors of my koi fish rippling out their dances, my 2-year-old niece, Luca, smiling down a yellow slide into my arms, my gaggle of teenagers I bring into the forest, leaving poems as breadcrumbs home, my sweet little black dog, frail with age, who wakes me at dawn to remember the sun rises. My wife, too, defiant with hope, fiery with love, building her new citizens. We populate ourselves with those who can hold us and who we can hold. landlocked together in a country all our own. We chop firewood together, 2 axes splitting hard wood for winter, whatever cold and bitter may come. We cold plunge naked into our backyard pond, fresh and freezing again as torrential rains answered drought. We dig our fingers into cold, dark earth and drop red tulip bulbs into the soil, blanket them up again with the promise of spring. Wrap ourselves, too, in that promise. We will stay close to our land, to the trees, to our small circles of love. I will stay close to the poets, hold our words as light. We are our own country now.
Right. Kai Coggin, also someone I got to interview on the Poetry Salon cast. And I'll put links to all of those interviews in the document for later consumption. All right, it is 5 past the hour at this point, and I really want to make sure everyone has time to do at least 20 minutes of writing. And as I said, once we get to the half an hour mark, I will turn off the recording. Actually, I'm going to turn off the recording right before we get into the writing. And so no one needs to worry about sharing anything. There's not going to be enough time for everyone to share. So you can definitely enjoy this writing time mainly for yourself. Don't worry about making your writing good. To quote the poet Mary Oliver, you do not have to be good. You do not have to wander 100 miles on your knees through the desert repenting. You only have to look at the rules that I shared with everyone. No, I'm kidding, of course. Poetry does not have rules, but we do have some guidelines, some suggestions. So I really want to suggest that as you are writing, try to bring yourself to these 3 main things. Can you focus on some small things that are small enough that you could put them in a jar, things that are that tangible? Can you make it personal? Can you talk about something that maybe you saw personally that not everyone else has seen? And then this last one was, can you make it move? So if there's no other thing that jumps to mind for you with all of these questions, I would offer the prompt that goes off of Kai Coggin's poem, which is, what is going on in the country of yourself? I went all the way down here. Oh, yeah, this is also another great one you can read by Gary Soto. Let me read this one very quickly because it offers another really wonderful prompt, I think. This is For All by Gary Soto. Ah, to be alive on a mid-September morn, fording a stream barefoot, pants rolled up, holding boots, pack on, sunshine, ice in the shallows, northern Rockies, rustle and shimmer of icy creek waters, stones turned underfoot, small and hard as toes, cold nose dripping, singing inside, creek music, heart music, smell of sun on gravel. I pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the soil of Turtle Island and to the beings who thereon dwell, one ecosystem in diversity under the sun with joyful interpretation for all. So there's many prompts you can do, but try a prompt about what you are pledging allegiance to, or what it looks like in the country of you right now. What can you do? What can you ally yourself with? So that is one possible prompt, but you can also talk about anything else that this stirs up for you. All right, I've been talking quite a lot, so we're going to take at least 20 minutes, and at the hour and a half mark, we will open it up for sharing. And for those of you who are writing along after the workshop is over. You can take as long as you want to work on this, and I hope you will reach out and share your thoughts with me in our Substack comments. Okay, I'm going to end the recording.